Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. Before we start, let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The story I'm about to tell you is a difficult one, but one I feel compelled to share. It's about how a single phone call from a number that should have been silent for 2 decades forced me to tear down the life I had built for my own son. My daughter, Sarah, was buried 20 years ago. She was 16, the light of my world, and a drunk driver took her from me in an instant. For 20 years, her phone number, the one I paid for every single month without fail, was a silent memorial. It was a ghost line, a connection to nothing that meant everything. I call it sometimes late at night just to hear the automated voice say the number was unavailable. It was a ritual of grief, a painful but necessary reminder. Then, last month, my phone rang. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in 20 years, Sarah Bear. My heart didn't just stop. It felt like it shattered and reformed in the span of a single, agonizing second. Time warped. For a moment, she was alive again. For a moment, the last 20 years were a nightmare from which I was finally waking. I answered, my hand trembling so violently I almost dropped the phone. My voice was a choked whisper. Sarah, a bright, cheerful voice answered, a voice I didn't recognize. Hi, Grandpa. It's me. It was my granddaughter, Lily. My son, Mark, and his wife, Karen, had named her after my Sarah's middle name, a gesture I once thought was sweet. But this was something else. I couldn't form words. The shock was a physical weight pressing down on my chest. Grandpa, are you there? Mommy said you'd be happy. I have a new phone. It's a really cool one. I heard Karen's voice in the background, saccharine and false. Tell him what your number is, sweetie. He'll want to save it. And then Lily, my sweet, innocent 6-year-old granddaughter, recited the 10 digits that had been seared into my soul for 2 decades. Sarah's number. They had taken my daughter's number, a line I kept active as a sacred memorial, and given it to their child as a hand-me-down. The air left my lungs. The world went gray at the edges. I ended the call without another word. And in that moment of profound, soul-crushing silence, something inside me, something that had been dormant for 20 years, finally broke. The grief that had softened me, that had made me generous to a fault, curdled into something cold, hard, and sharp. They had mistaken my sorrow for weakness. They had mistaken my generosity for an obligation. They were about to learn, in the most methodical and permanent way possible, that actions have consequences. To understand the magnitude of their transgression, you need to understand the last 20 years. After Sarah died, a part of me died with her. My wife had passed from cancer a few years prior, so it was just me and Mark. He was 18 then, and instead of us leaning on each other, he seemed to resent the cloud of grief that now perpetually hung over our home. I threw myself into my work as a civil engineer, building bridges for the city while my own family bridge crumbled. I also started investing quietly, methodically. It was a distraction, a complex puzzle that kept my mind from wandering back to the night of the accident. I became very, very good at it. Mark, however, drifted. He went to college on my dime, switched his major 3 times, and finally dropped out. He met Karen, a woman whose ambition seemed to extend only to the nearest shopping mall. I didn't like her, but Mark seemed happy, and I just wanted him to have some stability. So I helped. That's what a father does, right? I bought them their first car when they got married. I paid the down payment on their first apartment. When Lily was born, I was overjoyed. I saw Sarah in her eyes, and I vowed to give this little girl the world. My generosity escalated. Mark and Karen saw an opportunity, and they took it. They complained about their small apartment, so I bought a beautiful 4-bedroom house in a gated community. I put the deed in my name, a small act of self-preservation I told myself was just a smart legal move. I told them to consider it their home, to live there rent-free, to build their lives. My house, Karen would call it, whenever she was showing it off to her friends. The phrase always grated on me, a tiny splinter under the skin. Their car wasn't new enough, so I co-signed a loan for a luxury SUV. When Mark inevitably lost his job, a pattern that became distressingly regular, I didn't just help out, I paid the car note. I paid their utilities. I paid for their groceries via a credit card linked to my account. I paid for Lily's private school. I was not just a safety net. I was the entire foundation of their lives. And what did I get in return? Disrespect. It was subtle at first. A forgotten birthday. An unanswered phone call. Then it became more overt. They'd invite me over for holidays, only to have me sit in a corner while they entertained their friends, introducing me as Mark's dad. He helps us out. I wasn't family. I was a benefactor. A utility. Karen was the worst. She saw my quiet nature and old-fashioned clothes and assumed I was a simple old man with a modest pension. She had no idea about my portfolio, about the wealth I had carefully cultivated. She'd make passive-aggressive comments about my small, paid-off house. It's so quaint, Frank. I don't know how you live in such a cramped space. You should really let us find you a nice condo. We could sell this place and invest the money for you. Invest it for me. The irony was so thick, I could have choked on it. The calls about Sarah's phone bill started about a year ago. A customer service representative from the phone company would call me every few months. Sir, are you aware you're paying for a line with zero activity? We can cancel that for you and save you some money. Each time, I politely declined. It's for sentimental reasons, I'd say, and they'd leave me alone. But Mark and Karen must have overheard one of these calls during one of their rare visits. Or perhaps they saw the bill. The seed of an idea was planted in their materialistic minds. A free phone line. A way to save a paltry $40 a month. The thought process was likely simple and utterly devoid of empathy. It's an unused number. Dad's just being sentimental and weird. Lily needs a phone to call her friends. It's practical. It's efficient. They never considered what that number meant. They never considered the sacred space it occupied in my heart. To them, it was just an asset to be repurposed like an old piece of furniture. That phone call from Lily was the inciting incident, the final unforgivable act. After I hung up, I sat in my armchair for hours, the silence of my house a roaring testament to my solitude. The initial shock gave way to a wave of pure, unadulterated rage. I wanted to scream, to drive over there and demand they change the number back, to tell them how ghoulish and monstrous they were. But then, something else washed over me. A profound, chilling calm. The emotional dam I had built to contain my grief for 20 years didn't just break, it evaporated. And in its place was a cold, clear, strategic resolve. I finally saw my son and his wife for who they were, parasites. They had attached themselves to my grief, feeding on my love for my lost daughter and my desire to provide for my granddaughter. They had mistaken my pain-fueled generosity for a permanent resource they were entitled to. That night, I did not sleep. I went to my home office and unlocked a fireproof safe. Inside was every document that constituted the chains I had forged for them, chains they believed were a throne. The deed to their house, clearly and solely in my name, Franklin Miller. The title to their luxury SUV, also in my name. I had paid off the loan myself 2 years ago, another gift they had barely acknowledged. I pulled out bank statements from the last 10 years, and with a highlighter, I began to mark every single transfer to their account. Every utility bill paid. Every credit card charge for designer clothes and lavish dinners. The paper trail of their entitlement grew into a mountain on my desk. It was thousands upon thousands of dollars. Hundreds of thousands. It was a monument to my foolishness. By dawn, my plan was no longer a vague notion of revenge. It was a precise, multi-stage operation. I wasn't just going to cut them off. I was going to systematically dismantle the entire artificial world I had built for them. They needed to understand that everything they had, everything they flaunted as their own success, was a privilege, not a right. A privilege they had just revoked. The first call I made on Monday morning was not to my son, but to my lawyer, a man I had on retainer for my investment firm. David, I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. I need you to draw up an eviction notice. David, a sharp man in his 50s, listened patiently as I laid out the situation. He didn't offer sympathy or judgment, only professional clarity. Frank, this is well within your rights. The property is yours. They are, in legal terms, tenants at will with no lease agreement. A 30-day notice to vacate is standard and legally ironclad. Good, I replied. I want it served by a professional process server this Friday. I don't want any room for them to claim they didn't get it. Next, I laid out the second part of my plan, the creation of trust. I want to set up a trust for my granddaughter, Lily Miller. I will be the sole trustee until my death, at which point a corporate trustee will take over. The funds in the trust are to be used exclusively for her education and health care. She will gain full access to the principal balance on her 25th birthday. Under no circumstances are her parents, Mark and Karen Miller, to be named as beneficiaries, nor are they to have any control or access to the funds. Is that clear? David assured me it was. I arranged for an initial transfer of a substantial sum into the trust, an amount that would guarantee Lily a future, but one her parents couldn't touch. This was for Lily. The rest was for them. My second call was to the bank. I spoke to my personal wealth manager. Helen, I need to close my current checking and savings accounts and open new ones. I also need to cancel a secondary credit card issued to a Karen Miller. There was a pause. Helen knew my family situation. Is everything all right, Frank? Everything is finally being made right, I said. Please have a new account information and card sent here by courier. Effective immediately, I want all automatic transfers and bill payments linked to the old accounts to be terminated. This was the financial artery. By severing it, I was stopping the flow of lifeblood to their comfortable existence. The third step was the car. Since the title was in my name, repossessing it was laughably simple. I didn't even need a tow company. I had a spare key fob. My plan was to drive over there in the middle of the night on Thursday, the night before the eviction notice was served, and simply drive the car away. I would park it in my garage. When they woke up, their precious status symbol would just be gone. The final piece of the puzzle was the phone number. Sarah's number. I called the phone company. I explained that my account had been compromised and that a line had been transferred without my authorization. After navigating a maze of security questions, I proved my identity and my ownership of the account for the last 20 years. I want that number immediately deactivated and locked, I told the representative. I want it taken out of service permanently, so it can never be assigned to anyone again. We can certainly do that, sir. The deactivation will take effect within the hour. As I executed each step, I felt no glee, no sadistic pleasure. I felt a profound sense of peace. It was like I was cleaning a wound that had been festering for 2 decades. I was methodically removing the diseased tissue, cutting away the rot that had grown in the shadow of my grief. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming my life, my finances, and most importantly, my daughter's memory. For the next few days, I lived in a state of calm anticipation. I didn't answer any calls from Mark or Karen. I let them go to voicemail. They were a predictable mix of confusion and annoyance. Dad, Lily's phone isn't working. Did you forget to pay the bill or something? Call me back then, a few hours later, from Karen. Frank, my card was declined at the supermarket. It was so embarrassing. You need to figure out what's wrong with your account. I have a cart full of organic groceries here. I listened to the messages, my expression unchanged. The pieces were falling into place. Their world was beginning to fray at the edges, and they were so insulated by their entitlement that they couldn't even conceive of the truth. They assumed it was my mistake, my oversight. It never occurred to them that it was my intention. Thursday night arrived, clear and cold. At 2 a.m., I drove my modest sedan to their gated community. I knew the gate code, of course. I had chosen it myself, Sarah's birthday. The irony was a bitter pill. I parked down the street from their house, the lights all dark, the monument to my foolishness asleep. I walked up the perfectly manicured lawn that my money paid for, past the rose bushes I had paid to have planted. I stood in the driveway, the spare key fob in my hand. The luxury SUV, Karen's pride and joy, sat gleaming under a streetlight. I pressed the unlock button. The lights flashed, a silent welcome. I opened the door, slipped inside, and pressed the ignition. The engine purred to life. As I backed out of the driveway, I took one last look at the house. It was just a building of wood and brick, but it represented a prison of my own making. I was finally walking free. The next morning, Friday, was the day the dominoes would truly fall. At 10:05 a.m., I received a text from the process server. Package delivered, the eviction notice was now in their hands. I imagine the scene. Karen, probably still in her expensive pajamas, opening the certified letter. The confusion turning to disbelief, then to rage. The fuse was lit. My phone started ringing almost instantly. It was Mark. I let it go to voicemail. Then Karen. Voicemail. Then Mark again. I sat in my kitchen, sipping my coffee, listening to the frantic messages pile up. Dad, what is this? What the hell is this eviction notice? Is this a joke? Call me right now. Then Karen, her voice a shrill shriek. Frank, where's my car? My car is gone. Did someone steal it? And this letter? Mark says you sent this letter. You can't kick us out. This is our house. I took another sip of coffee. Your house, Karen? That's funny. The deed in my safe says otherwise. The text started flooding in, a torrent of panicked, misspelled demands. Where's the car? Call me now. This isn't legal. You can't do this. Lily is crying. You monster. They were spiraling, their entire reality collapsing in on them. And their first instinct was not to ask why, but to attack, to demand, to command. They still didn't get it. They still thought they held the power. They were about to learn who had been in control all along. Around noon, I heard a car skid to a halt outside my house. A door slammed with enough force to rattle my windows. Heavy, angry footsteps stomped up my porch. Then a frantic, furious pounding on my front door. It was time for the confrontation. I took a deep breath, walked to the door, and opened it. There they stood, Mark and Karen, their faces contorted with rage and disbelief. They had taken an Uber. Karen's eyes were wild, her hair a mess. Mark looked pale and shaken. What have you done? He hissed, pushing past me into my living room. Karen followed, her voice dripping with venom. You senile old fool. You think you can just throw us out on the street? In my car. You had it stolen, didn't you? We're calling the police. I calmly closed the door behind them and turned to face them. I gestured to the sofa. Sit down. I'm not sitting down. Karen shrieked. I want answers. You will get them, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. But you will sit down and you will listen. In my house, you will show me respect. It's a concept you seem to have forgotten. Something in my tone, a steel they had never heard before, made them hesitate. They exchanged a look, and then, reluctantly, they sat on the edge of the sofa. I remained standing. I walked over to my desk and picked up a thick file folder. I tossed it onto the coffee table in front of them. It landed with a heavy, definitive thud. What is that? Mark asked, his anger tempered by a sliver of fear. That, I said, is your life. Or rather, the life I have been funding for the last 15 years. Open it. Mark reached out a trembling hand and opened the folder. Inside, on top, was the deed to their house. He stared at it, his face draining of color. My name, I said softly. Franklin Miller. Not Mark Miller. Not Karen Miller. My name. My house. I let that sink in. Karen snatched the paper from him. This has to be a mistake. It's no mistake. I continued, my voice methodical and detached. Flip the page. The next document was the title to the SUV. Again, only my name was on it. My car, I stated plainly, which I retrieved from my property last night. It is now parked in my garage. You will not be driving it again. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. The rage on her face was being replaced by a dawning, horrified comprehension. Keep going, I instructed. They flipped through the next pages. Bank statements, credit card bills. Every line item I had highlighted was a testament to their dependence. A $10,000 vacation to Hawaii. A $700 handbag for Karen. Endless charges for restaurants they couldn't afford, clothes they didn't need, a lifestyle they hadn't earned. For years, I began, my voice a low, steady monologue. I have paid for everything. Your home, your cars, your food, your child's education. I did this because you're my family. I did this because after I lost Sarah, I thought that giving you everything was a way to hold on to what little I had left. I paused, looking directly at them. I was wrong. I wasn't giving. I was enabling. I created two entitled, ungrateful children who believe the world owes them a living. Mark finally found his voice, a weak, pleading whisper. Dad, why? Why are you doing this? And then I let the full weight of my reasoning fall upon them. Because you took my daughter's phone number, the statement hung in the air, simple and devastating. They stared at me, utterly bewildered. The eviction, the car, the money, they understood those things. But a phone number? It didn't compute. What? Karen stammered. What does a phone number have to do with anything? It was just a number. It wasn't being used. It was being used by me. I shot back, my voice rising for the first time. It was my connection to her. It was a memorial. For 20 years, I paid that bill as a way to keep a piece of her alive, a piece of her that was just for me. And you, in your infinite greed and disrespect, saw it as a way to save $40 a month. You took that memory, that sacred, private piece of my grief, and you erased it. You handed it to your daughter like an old toy. I walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up my favorite picture of Sarah. She was 16, smiling, full of life. I held it up. You did this to her. You desecrated her memory for convenience. You tried to replace her with a new number, a new life, as if she were disposable. The truth of my words finally hit them. This wasn't a sudden fit of madness. This was a direct consequence of their actions. So, here is what is going to happen, I said, putting the picture back in its place. You have 30 days to vacate my house. The credit cards are canceled. The bank accounts are closed. The car is mine. You're on your own. You want to be adults? This is your chance, but... Lily, Mark stammered. What about Lily? I've already taken care of Lily, I said coldly. I have set up a trust in her name that will pay for her education and her future. A trust that you will never, ever be able to touch. I will always provide for my granddaughter, but I will no longer provide for you. Karen started to cry, fat, crocodile tears of self-pity. You can't do this to us. We'll be homeless. We have nothing. You have each other, I replied, the irony thick in my voice. You have your resourcefulness. You have 2 arms and 2 legs. Go get jobs. Go build a life. The one you had was a gift, and you threw it away. I walked back to the front door and opened it. Your Uber is probably wondering where you are. It's time for you to leave my house. They stumbled out in a daze, the file folder clutched in Mark's hand like a death certificate for the life they once knew. I closed the door, and for the first time in 20 years, the silence in my house felt like peace, not emptiness. The aftermath was exactly what you'd expect. They moved into a cramped, 2-bedroom apartment across town. Mark got a job at a big box store, and Karen works as a receptionist. They struggle. They fight. I hear about it through the grapevine. They have tried to contact me, sending pleading texts and leaving tearful voicemails. I have blocked their numbers. My justice is not about their continued suffering. It's about my peace. I see Lily every other weekend. I pick her up, and we go to the park or the museum. Her parents have coached her to ask me for things, to plead their case. Grandpa, Mommy says we can't afford our apartment. Can we come live in your big house again? I just smile, buy her an ice cream, and change the subject. I tell her stories about her Aunt Sarah, the girl she was partly named after. I am building a foundation for her, one of love and genuine support, not a material excess. The moral of this story isn't just that actions have consequences. It's that you should never mistake a person's kindness for weakness, or their grief for a bottomless well of resources. Memory is sacred. Respect is earned. And sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is to let their children finally, truly grow up. Thank you for listening to my story. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I'll be reading them. And if you have a story of your own about standing up for yourself, I'd love to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one.